The room was silent except for the hum of machines. Cold white lights shone down on silver floors, making the place look more like a prison than a laboratory. In the center of the room stood a large glass cell. Inside sat a young alien girl. Her knees pulled up to her chest, her thin arms wrapped around them. She was small, fragile, with pale skin that almost looked silver under the harsh lights. Her long white hair hung around her face like a curtain, hiding her large, glowing eyes. She had no name, no family, no home, only a number printed on the tag around her wrist. Every day was the same. Men and women in white coats came in, took notes, and connected wires to her arms and head. The wires ran to machines that beeped and clicked, measuring things she didn't understand. Sometimes they pricked her with needles. Sometimes they made her swallow strange liquids. She never spoke, not because she didn't want to, but because no one had ever spoken to her kindly. To them, she wasn't a person, she was a test subject. A thing to be studied, born to be tested. Never loved. The only world she had ever known was this room. No sky, no sun. No stars, just four walls of glass and the cold gaze of strangers. Sometimes she wondered if the outside world was even real, or if it was just another lie the scientists told to make her cooperate. Her body ached from the tests, and her heart ached from the loneliness. She had never been touched gently, never been held, never been told she mattered. On this day, the room was quieter than usual. The usual group of scientists didn't come. Instead, the hallway outside echoed with the sound of heavy boots. Voices shouted orders, metal clashed against metal, and somewhere in the distance, alarms began to blare. The girl pressed her face against the glass, trying to see what was happening through the haze of the hallway's smoke. She saw something she had never seen before. Human soldier. He was tall, wearing black armor marked with a golden insignia. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat. Aqueta's eyes were sharp and alive. He stopped when he saw her. For a long moment, they just stared at each other through the glass. Her glowing eyes met his human ones, and something shifted in the air between them. It was not the cold, detached look she was used to. This look was different. It was a look that saw her, not as a number, not as a thing, but as someone. The soldier took a step toward the glass. "What the hell is this place?" he muttered under his breath, scanning the machines and wires. The girl didn't answer. She didn't know if she was even allowed to. But she couldn't stop looking at him. He was the first living thing who had ever looked back with anything other than cold curiosity. Then, from behind him, a voice shouted, "Marcus, we don't have time. Leave it." The soldier Marcus turned his head toward the voice, then back to the girl. She didn't know why, but her chest tightened with fear. He was going to leave. Everyone always left. Marcus stepped right up to the glass, placing his hand flat against it. The girl slowly lifted her own hand and pressed it to the same spot from inside. Her palm was small and cold against the barrier. Marcus's brow furrowed, and for a moment, he seemed to be making a choice in his head. Then, without warning, he drew his weapon and fired at the lock. The glass door hissed as it slid open. The girl flinched back, unsure if this was another test, but Marcus reached for her hand, his voice low and steady. "Come on. We're getting you out of here." She hesitated, trembling. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. The alarms grew louder, and red lights began to flash across the ceiling. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps, many footsteps closing in fast. Marcus didn't wait. He stepped forward, grabbed her arm, and pulled her out of the glass cell. She stumbled, her legs weak from years of confinement, but he caught her before she fell, the moment his hand wrapped around hers. A strange warmth spread through her chest. It felt alien, and yet right. She clung to him instinctively, afraid that if she let go, she'd be dragged back into that cold prison forever. The door at the far end burst open and armored guards stormed in. Weapons raised, Marcus moved fast, placing himself between her and the danger. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice firm but not unkind. Blaster fire exploded across the room, sparks flying from the metal walls. Marcus returned fire, every shot precise, every movement quick and sure. The girl pressed herself against his back, her glowing eyes wide with terror. She didn't know who he was or why he was here, but she knew one thing: he was the first person who had ever chosen her. And in that moment, with the alarm screaming and danger closing in from all sides, she made a silent promise to herself. She would follow him anywhere. Asterisk. The blaster fire lit up the white room in flashes of blue and red. Marcus's shots were sharp and quick, forcing the guards to duck for cover. The girl stayed close to him, her bare feet cold on the metal floor. Her heart raced so fast, she thought it might burst. The alarms were deafening now. Echoing down the long hallway beyond, Marcus grabbed her hand tighter and pulled her toward the exit. "Move," he barked. Though his voice carried more urgency than anger, she stumbled at first. Unused to walking so fast, her legs trembled. But she forced them to keep moving. Every step away from that glass room felt like running from a nightmare. They burst into the corridor. Smoke hung in the air from earlier blasts, and sparks showered down from broken light panels. Figures in armor ran in the distance, their voices sharp and cold. Marcus pulled the girl into a side hallway, his boots pounding against the floor. She could feel the strength in his grip was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. "Stay close to me," he said, glancing over his shoulder. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she nodded once, clutching his arm like her life depended on it, which, in truth, it did. A security drone floated around the corner ahead, its red sensor locking on them. It let out a high-pitched alarm, and a beam of light scanned across their faces before it could fire. Marcus raised his blaster and took it down with a single shot. The machine dropped to the floor in a burst of sparks. The girl flinched at the sound, but Marcus didn't slow down. The hallway opened into a massive chamber lined with tall metal walls. Rows of locked doors stretched into the distance, each one holding something to or someone inside. The girl's eyes darted to the cells as they passed. She caught glimpses of other captives' strange shapes and faces, some too weak to even look up. Her chest ached at the sight. She had been like them only minutes ago. "Don't stop," Marcus urged, tugging her forward. But she couldn't help glancing back. She wondered if he would save them too. Yet his face told her the truth. There was no time. A sudden blast rocked the building, shaking the walls. Lights flickered overhead, and a deep rumble came from somewhere. Below, Marcus cursed under his breath. "They're collapsing the lower levels." The girl didn't know what that meant, but the fear in his voice was enough. They ran harder, weaving through the maze of corridors. Finally, they reached a heavy steel door marked with glowing red symbols. Marcus punched a code into the panel, but it flashed an error. "They've locked it down," he muttered. Pulling a small device from his belt, he attached it to the door, sparks flying as it cut through the lock while he worked. The girl heard the pounding of boots getting closer. Her stomach twisted. The door didn't open soon. They'd be trapped. The lock gave way with a sharp hiss. Marcus yanked the door open and pushed her through. On the other side was a long walkway hanging above a dark pit far ahead. She could see another door, this one leading to a faint glow of light. Her breath caught. It was sunlight, something she had never seen except in blurry images on the lab's monitors. They ran across the walkway, but halfway through, voices rose behind them. The guards had reached the door they had just come through. Blaster fire ripped across the metal rails, sparks flying dangerously close. Marcus turned and fired back while urging her forward. She ducked low, gripping the rail, every instinct screaming at her to keep going. The final door opened with a groan, and the sunlight spilled over her face. It was warm, brighter than she had imagined. For a moment, she forgot the danger. The air smelled fresh, nothing like the recycled stale air in the lab. She wanted to stop and breathe it in forever, but Marcus didn't let her pause. He pulled her outside onto a landing platform. The wind whipped at her hair. Carrying the scent of trees and earth, far below, she saw a forest stretching endlessly. It was the first time she realized how small the lab was compared to the world. A loud roar broke her thoughts. Above them, a black dropship hovered into view. Its engines rumbling, Marcus fired a signal flare into the air. The ship's hatch opened, and a rope ladder dropped down toward them. "Go!" Marcus shouted, helping her grab the ladder. She hesitated, looking back at the doorway where shadows of the guards were already appearing. Marcus gave her a firm push upward, then began to climb behind her. The rope swayed wildly in the wind. The ground far below, her hands burned from gripping it so tightly halfway up. A blaster shot hit the ladder just beneath Marcus's feet. He gritted his teeth and kept climbing. The ship's engines roared louder as it lifted higher, pulling them away from the danger. When they finally rolled onto the ship's floor, she lay there, gasping, her heart pounding. Marcus closed the hatch behind them and looked down at her. "You're safe now," he said, though his tone held the weight of someone who knew it wasn't over. The girl stared up at him, unsure if she could believe those words, but deep down, something told her that as long as he was with her, she had a chance. The dropship flew low over the endless green forest. The girl sat near the back, clutching the thin blanket Marcus had wrapped around her shoulders. She had never felt the cold air rushing against her skin like this before. It was sharp and clean. Carrying the scent of trees and rain, every breath made her chest feel lighter. Though she didn't understand why, Marcus sat across from her, watching quietly. He was giving her space, letting her take in everything at her own pace. Her glowing eyes scanned the sky through the open side hatch. Clouds drifted slowly above, and beams of sunlight slipped through them. She had seen pictures of the sky on lab monitors, but seeing it for real was different. It felt alive. After a while, Marcus spoke, his voice steady. "You're breathing too fast." The girl blinked at him. Confused, "You don't have to rush it," he said, taking a slow, deep breath to show her. "Inhale. Hold. Then let it out." She hesitated, then tried to copy him. At first, it felt strange. She was used to air being pushed into her lungs by machines. But when she let the breath out slowly, a warmth spread through her body. It was the first time. She realized she could control it. "You've never been outside, have you?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. She shook her head, clutching the blanket tighter. For a moment, she looked down, ashamed. But Marcus didn't pity her. His gaze was calm, almost protective. "Then you've already done something brave today," he said. "You faced the sky." The dropship landed in a small clearing deep in the forest. Marcus let her out, his hand firm but gentle on her shoulder. The ground was soft with moss and leaves, the air cool and damp. She looked around slowly, as if afraid the trees might vanish if she blinked. Birds chirped in the distance, and a breeze moved through the branches. Every sound was strange and new. It was nothing like the hum of machines in the glass room. They walked until they reached an abandoned outpost, a low stone building half covered in vines. Marcus pushed open the creaking door, and they stepped inside. It was quiet, dry, and smelled faintly of earth. "This'll do for now," he murmured, setting down his pack. The girl stood in the doorway, unsure if she was allowed to enter. Marcus noticed her hesitation. "It's safe here," he said. "Come in." She stepped inside slowly, her bare feet brushing against the rough stone floor. Marcus pulled out a small container and opened it, revealing dried food rations. He handed one to her, but she just stared at it. "What is it?" she asked softly, her voice rough from years of silence. "It's food," he said, breaking a piece off and eating it himself to show her. She watched him for a moment, then took a bite. Her face tightened at the unfamiliar taste, but she kept chewing. It was the first solid food she had ever eaten. When she finished, Marcus handed her a bottle of water. She looked at it strangely. "No tube?" she asked. "No tube," Marcus said with a faint smile. She lifted it carefully and took a small sip. The cool water slid down her throat, and her eyes widened. It was different from the thick, tasteless liquids they used in the lab. This was clean, refreshing, almost sweet. Later, when the sun began to set, Marcus lit a small fire in the center of the room. The girls sat near it, watching the flames dance. Their glow reflected in her eyes, and for the first time, there was no fear. Their only wonder. Marcus cleaned the cut on her arm where the wires had been, working carefully so he didn't hurt her. "Why?" she asked suddenly, her voice trembling. "Why did you take me?" Marcus paused, meeting her gaze, because no one else would. He said simply. The words hit her harder than she expected. No one had ever said something like that to her before. It was as if he was telling her she mattered. Her hands tightened in the blanket, and for a moment she didn't know how to respond. That night, as the fire burned low, Marcus sat against the wall with his blaster beside him. The girl lay curled up under the blanket for the first time in her life. She was not locked in a glass room. For the first time, there were no wires on her skin. No cold hands forcing her into tests. She could hear Marcus's steady breathing, and somehow it made her feel safe. But just before sleep took her, she heard a faint sound outside. She sat up slightly, her heart pounding. Marcus's eyes opened instantly, his hand going to his weapon. The sound came again, footsteps crunching over leaves. Slow and careful. Marcus gestured for her to stay low, his expression sharp. The warmth of the fire was replaced by the chill of fear. Whoever was out there was getting closer. The footsteps outside the outpost grew louder. Marcus stayed perfectly still, listening. The girl's glowing eyes were wide, her body tense under the thin blanket. She could hear the crunch of boots on leaves, the faint click of weapons being readied. Her stomach knotted. She knew the sound of hunters. Marcus motioned for her to stay behind the fire's glow. He moved silently toward the doorway, his blaster already in his hands. Outside, the night air was damp and cold. A thin mist curled around the trees, hiding shapes in the darkness. But Marcus's eyes were sharp. He saw movement. 3 shadows gliding between the trunks. Closing in from different sides, he stepped back into the room, his voice low but firm. "We've been found." The girl's breath caught. "How?" she whispered, though she already knew they would never stop looking for her. Marcus didn't answer. There was no time. The pounding of boots on stone echoed as the first hunter stepped into view. Armored head to toe, visor glowing red. He raised his weapon, but Marcus fired first, the blast lighting up the doorway. The hunter fell, sparks jumping from his damaged suit. "Move," Marcus ordered, grabbing the girl's hand. They bolted out the back of the outpost into the forest. The cold night wrapped around them, the ground soft and uneven under their feet. The girl stumbled, but Marcus kept her upright, never slowing. Behind them, shouts rang out, followed by more blasts. Blue streaks of light tore through the trees, sizzling against bark. "Faster," Marcus urged, his own breath coming hard now. The girl tried. She really did, but her bare feet cut against sharp stones and roots. Pain shot through her legs, but she didn't make a sound. She was afraid if she slowed down, he might leave her behind. They reached a slope that dropped toward a wide river. The moonlight shimmered on its surface, fast-moving and dark. Marcus glanced back. The hunters were gaining. Without hesitation, he pulled her toward the water. "We're crossing," he said, her eyes widened. In that? It's the only way, Marcus replied, already wading in. The icy water bit into her skin, making her gasp. The current pushed hard against her legs. Trying to sweep her away, Marcus's grip on her arm was the only thing keeping her steady. Halfway across, the water reached her chest. She clung to Marcus, coughing as the cold stung her lungs. A blast hissed past them, striking the water and sending up a spray. Marcus pulled her under briefly, letting the current carry them farther downstream before surfacing. By the time they reached the other bank, her whole body was shaking. He hauled her onto the mud, his own breaths ragged. The forest here was thicker, the shadows deeper. Marcus didn't stop. He pulled her into the cover of the trees, crouching low. They could still hear the hunters shouting across the river. Lights swept the bank as they searched. The girl's heart pounded so loud she thought it would give them away. Marcus placed a finger to his lips, silent. They waited, unmoving as the hunters scanned the trees. One of them fired into the shadows, the blast lighting the leaves for a brief second. The girl almost flinched, but Marcus's hand on her shoulder kept her still. Eventually, the voices grew fainter, moving upstream. Only then did Marcus let out a slow breath. "We can't go back," he murmured. She nodded, though her teeth chattered too hard to speak. Her clothes were soaked, clinging to her thin frame. Marcus shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her. The warmth was small, but it made her feel safer. They moved through the forest in silence. Every branch snap made them pause. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Marcus was constantly scanning ahead. The girl stayed close, matching her steps to his, somewhere deep inside. She knew this was how her life would be now, running, hiding, surviving after hours of walking. They found a small hollow under an old fallen tree. It was cramped, but hidden. Marcus crawled in first, then helped her inside. The damp earth smelled of moss. He pulled a thin blanket from his pack and draped it over her shoulders again. "You should rest," he said quietly. She shook her head. "If I sleep, they'll come." "They won't tonight," Marcus assured, though his eyes stayed alert. The girl looked at him for a long moment. "You could leave me," she said softly. "You'd be safer," Marcus frowned. "That's not going to happen." Her throat tightened at his words. She didn't understand why he cared. No one ever had before. But in that dark, damp hollow, with the hunter still somewhere out there, she realized something. He wasn't just helping her escape. He was teaching her what it felt like to be protected. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of movement. Marcus's hand tightened on his blaster, his eyes narrowing. The girl stayed very still, her heart racing again. The hunters weren't far, and she knew it was only a matter of time before they caught up. Morning light filtered through the thick trees, casting soft golden beams over the damp forest floor. The girl opened her eyes slowly, surprised she had actually slept. For the first time in her life, she had not woken to the sound of machines or the sting of needles. Instead, she woke to the sound of birdsong and the smell of fresh air. Marcus was already awake, crouched a few steps away. Scanning the trees, his blaster rested on his knee, but his eyes kept moving, sharp and watchful. When he noticed she was awake, he gave a small nod. "Morning," he said simply. She sat up, still wrapped in the thin blanket he had given her. Her hair was tangled, her skin still pale from years indoors. The cold morning air made her shiver, and Marcus noticed without a word. He pulled something from his pack, a folded piece of clothing. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "It's not much, but it'll keep you warmer." She unfolded it slowly, running her fingers over the fabric. It was soft and worn, smelling faintly of smoke and pine. She slipped it over her head, the sleeves hanging past her small hands. It was the first piece of clothing that wasn't issued to her for a test. For a moment, she just sat there, holding the edges close. "Why do you keep helping me?" she asked quietly. Marcus met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Because you need it," he replied. "And because no one else will." They walked most of the morning, staying off open paths. The forest was alive with soundbirds calling, leaves rustling, branches creaking in the wind. She tried to take it all in, each new detail strange and beautiful. But the fear was still there, sitting heavy in her chest. Any moment, she expected hunters to appear. Dragging her back to the glass room, by midday, they reached the edge of a small human settlement. It was tucked between the hills, with simple wooden houses and narrow dirt paths. Marcus stopped at the edge, scanning the area carefully. "We'll rest here," he said. "But we can't stay long." She hesitated, clinging to his arm. "What if someone tells them?" she whispered. "They might," Marcus admitted. "That's why we move fast." They stepped into the settlement. People looked up as they passed, some curious, some wary. Marcus kept his hand lightly on her shoulder, guiding her through the narrow lanes. At a small shop, he traded some supplies from his pack for food and a pair of worn shoes. When he knelt to help her put them on, she flinched slightly. Unused to anyone touching her gently. "You'll need these if we're going to keep moving," he said. She stared at the shoes, then at him, unsure how to thank him later. They found a quiet spot behind one of the houses where they could eat. Without drawing too much attention, Marcus passed her a bowl of warm soup. She tasted it carefully, rich, salty, and full of flavors she had never known before. Her eyes closed for a moment as she savored it. When she opened them again, Marcus was watching her with a faint smile. "It's better than lab food, isn't it?" he asked. She nodded quickly, a small smile tugging at her lips after they finished. Marcus leaned back against the wall, studying her. "You've been through a lot," he said quietly. She lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. "Do you have a name?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "In the lab, I was only a number," she whispered. Marcus's jaw tightened, and for a moment he didn't speak. Then he said, "That's going to change." He thought for a moment, looking at her in the soft afternoon light. Her glowing eyes caught the sun, reflecting it like tiny stars. Finally, he said, "Leora." She blinked at him. "What does it mean?" "It means light in an old language," Marcus explained. "Because you've lived in darkness long enough." Her chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something warmer. No one had ever given her anything like this before. Her name, her identity, it felt like a gift. "Leora," she repeated softly. Tasting the sound, Marcus nodded. "That's you now." She smiled, really smiled for the first time since leaving the lab, but the moment didn't last long. From across the settlement, they heard raised voices. Marcus's expression darkened. "They've heard there's a bounty," he said under his breath. Leora's eyes widened. "For me?" "For us," Marcus corrected. Already standing, they gathered their things quickly. People were starting to glance their way, whispers passing from one to another. Marcus's hand found hers, pulling her into the shadows between two houses. "Stay close, no matter what," he said. Leora nodded, gripping his hand tightly. The sound of boots hitting the dirt road grew louder. They weren't hunters this time, at least, not the armored kind, but danger was danger. Marcus led her toward the hills beyond the settlement. As they slipped away, Leora whispered her new name under her breath. She wasn't just a number anymore, and she would never let them take that from her. The hills rose steep and uneven, forcing Marcus and Leora to climb through thick brush and loose stones. Behind them, voices carried through the air closer than Marcus liked. He knew the settlement's men would follow for the bounty. Money could turn even decent people into hunters. The sound of snapping branches told him they weren't far. By the time they reached a narrow mountain pass, the sun was sinking low. The orange light spilled across the jagged rocks, casting long shadows. Marcus stopped, scanning the terrain ahead. The pass was tight. Only wide enough for two people to walk side by side. It could be their only chance to hold off the pursuers. "We'll make a stand here," he said firmly. Leora's glowing eyes widened. "You mean, fight them?" He nodded. "If we keep running, they'll catch us in the open." Her throat tightened. "What if they hurt you?" Marcus gave her a faint smile. "Then I'll make sure they don't hurt you first." They moved quickly, stacking loose stones into a small barrier across the narrowest part of the pass. Marcus showed her how to reload the smaller blaster he carried as a spare. Her hands trembled as she held it. "You don't have to fire unless they get close," he told her. "Just stay low and watch my back." She nodded, though fear prickled in her chest. The voices grew louder. Shadows moved at the far end of the pass. Marcus crouched behind the stones, aiming his blaster. Leora stayed a step behind him, her fingers tight around the weapon. The first figure appeared, a man from the settlement. Holding an old hunting rifle, behind him came more. Some armored, some not, all carrying weapons. Marcus called out, "You don't have to do this." One of the men shouted back, "Step aside, soldier. The bounty isn't for you." Marcus's voice was sharp. "Then you'll have to go through me." The man hesitated for only a second before raising his rifle. Marcus fired first, the blast striking the ground near his feet, sending dust into the air. The pass erupted with shouts and gunfire. Blaster bolts and bullets cracked against the stones. Marcus fired in controlled bursts, forcing the men to keep their heads down. Leora ducked low, peeking only when Marcus shifted. One man rushed forward, trying to flank them. Marcus's shot dropped him before he could get close. The smell of smoke and scorched rock filled the air. A sharp whistle cut through the noise. From above the pass, two figures climbed down the rocks, trying to come from the side. Marcus turned to fire, but one of them leaped forward, knocking him to the ground. The blaster slid from his hand, clattering across the stones. Leora froze. Her heart hammering. Marcus was pinned. The man raised a knife, but before she could think, she fired. The shot hit the man in the shoulder, knocking him back. Marcus rolled free, grabbing his blaster. His eyes flicked to Leora for a brief second, pride and relief in his gaze, before he turned back to the fight. More men pushed forward, the sound of boots scraping rock filling the narrow space. Marcus's shots were quick and sure, each one keeping them from advancing. Then came the sound of heavier boots and the hum of powered armor. Leora's blood ran cold. She knew that sound. It belonged to the lab's real hunters. Two black-armored figures stepped into view, their visors glowing red in the dim light. One of them spoke, his voice cold through the helmet. "Return the subject, and you may live." Marcus didn't answer. He just fired. The bolts glanced off the hunter's armor. Marcus cursed under his breath. Switching to a heavier setting on his blaster, the second hunter moved fast, closing the gap. Marcus blocked the strike with his arm, but the impact sent him stumbling. The first hunter aimed at Leora. She raised the small blaster Marcus had given her, but her hands shook. Something inside her stirred a strange heat in her chest. Her vision sharpened, and the air around her seemed to hum when the hunter fired. A pulse of light burst from her hands. It slammed into him with a force that sent him crashing into the rock wall. Marcus's eyes widened in shock, but there was no time to question it. The second hunter lunged again, but Marcus's next shot hit a weak point in the armor. The man staggered, and Marcus finished him with another blast. The rest of the bounty hunters faltered, seeing their strongest fall. One by one, they backed away, dragging the wounded with them. The pass grew silent, except for the crackle of burning rock. Marcus lowered his blaster. Breathing hard, he turned to Leora, who was still staring at her hands in disbelief. "What was that?" she asked, her voice shaking. Marcus stepped closer. "Something they didn't want you to know you had." Her eyes met his, fear and wonder mixing in them. "They'll come back," she whispered. "Yes," Marcus said, "but so will we." The mountain pass was quiet now. The smoke from the blaster fire drifted into the cool evening air. Marcus stood with his blaster still in hand, his eyes scanning the shadows to make sure the hunters were truly gone. Beside him, Leora clutched the small weapon he had given her. Her hands still trembled not from fear, but from the strange power she had unleashed. Marcus turned to her, his expression softer now. "You did well," he said. Leora's glowing eyes searched his face. "I didn't mean to. I didn't even know I could." He shook his head. "You saved my life. That's all that matters." The words warmed something deep inside her, something no one had ever touched before. They left the pass before nightfall, moving down into the forest on the other side. The air was cool and smelled of pine. Leora walked close to Marcus, still glancing over her shoulder as if expecting more hunters to appear. But the forest remained calm, only the sounds of insects and distant birds breaking the silence by the time the moon rose. They found a small clearing with a fallen log beside a narrow stream. Marcus set down his pack and knelt by the water. "Drink," he told her, cupping some in his own hands to show it was safe. She knelt beside him, the water cool and sweet against her lips. For a moment, they just sat there in silence, the stream's gentle sound soothing the tension in their chests. When they had eaten a small meal, Marcus began to make a small fire. The orange flames soon cast a warm glow across the clearing. Leora sat close to it, her knees drawn to her chest. She glanced at Marcus, her voice quiet. "When you found me in the glass room, you could have left." Marcus paused, looking at her across the flames. "I could have," he admitted, "but I didn't, because you deserved more than what they gave you." Her eyes lowered to the fire. "No one has ever thought that before," she whispered. Marcus leaned forward, his voice firm. "Well, I do, and I always will." The certainty in his tone made her chest feel tight. It was a feeling she couldn't quite name, but it felt like belonging. After a while, she looked up at him again. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus glanced at the dark forest beyond. "They'll keep looking for you," he said. "But I'm not going to hand you over. Not now, not ever." Her voice was soft, "Even if it means they'll come after you, too." He met her gaze without hesitation, especially then. The firelight flickered across her pale face. She thought of all the days she had spent in the lab, cold, empty, nameless. She thought of the moment he broke the lock and reached for her hand, and she realized something. From that moment on, she hadn't been alone. "Marcus," she said slowly, tasting his name like she had tasted her own when he gave it to her. "I choose you." He blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "In the lab, they chose everything for me," she said, her voice trembling. "What I ate, where I slept, what they did to me. I never got to choose anything." Her eyes shone with both fear and determination. "But now I can, and I choose to stay with you." Marcus stared at her for a moment. Then a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Then I guess that makes us a team," he said. Her smile was small, but real. It was the kind of smile that said she believed him, the kind of smile that carried hope. They stayed by the fire until the stars filled the sky. Leora lay on the blanket Marcus had spread for her. The warmth of the flames at her back, Marcus sat nearby, keeping watch, his silhouette steady against the glow. For the first time in her life, she didn't dread the next day. For the first time, she believed she had a future. As she drifted towards sleep, she whispered her name softly. "Leora." It still felt strange, but it was hers. She had been born to be tested, never loved, but now she had been chosen not as an experiment, not as a weapon, but as a person. chosen by the one human who had risked everything for her. In the stillness of the night, Marcus glanced at her sleeping form. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring: more danger, more running, more fights. But he knew one thing: no matter where they went, no matter who came after them, he would protect her. Not because she was a mission, but because she was Leora. And in that quiet, firelit clearing, it was enough.